Mr Acting Speaker.
Member for Whitsunday.
Thank you, Mr Acting Speaker. I contribute also to the Budget Estimates report of the Legal Affairs and Safety Committee. And while I note the memory lane story that the attorney has just shared with me, given I wasn't a member of this House back in 2012, I would also like to equally remind her that it was in fact the LNP government that did instigate the Not Now, Not Ever report, an initiative which has now been adopted by the Labor government and has been implemented. And what a great piece of work that was, led by Quinton Bryce, to go a long way in supporting women across our great state. I'd also like to outline that the $25.6 million that was contributed by the Scott Morrison coalition government in a response to COVID-19 and domestic and family violence was very much welcomed by our state of Queensland. What was disappointing was that the Queensland government only co-contributed $7.5 million as part of their COVID response to domestic and family violence, in comparison to the Victorian government, which contributed $20 million, Mr Acting Speaker, which equates to 65% proportionate to the federal government's contribution, leaving Queensland's contribution at only 29%. So I think we still have a long way to go before we can be lecturing other sides of the House about how we are funding domestic and family violence equally across our other states in this nation. I'd also like to highlight that since 2016, under the current Labor government, there has been no increase to core funding, which services across the Queensland Domestic Violence Service Network have been advocating for. It was pleasing to hear that in the current negotiation of service agreements that the Director-General did outline that they would consider and look at the reporting methods, including outputs, and the increased administration burden that is being felt by services that are under enormous pressure on the back of COVID-19 and the impacts of continued lockdowns, the impacts of uncertainty, and in particular in areas like Cairns, where we've seen an increase of 200% in demand for women's legal services on the back of impacts up there. Also wanted to outline that the angst amongst the service sector, in particular on the back of the $7.5 million in COVID additional funding, was very challenging during the budget process. When the minister announced the $7.5 million would continue, the department had neglected to communicate that formally with individual services across our state. Those consequences led services across our state to make HR decisions, to make project decisions, because of the level of uncertainty delivered by this Labor government. It was noted that decisions were made on notifying services of the extension of their funding in the last week of the financial year. Many of these services, non-government and not-for-profit organisations that operate with volunteer boards, deserve a high level of respect by this Labor government and understanding that they are dealing with significant demand for service, not just on the back of COVID-19, but at the government's own admission of population growth across our state. I'd also like to highlight that while we welcomed investment in refuge, that it has taken almost 6 years for the minister, along with the housing minister, to convene a housing crisis roundtable for women and children fleeing domestic violence across this state. With the housing roundtable, the minister was not able to outline what outcomes were to be achieved, what goals were set, any timeframes for deliverables, and so we continue to watch that space. But without a doubt, the housing crisis, domestic and family violence, is placing significant impacts on women's economic security across our state. The displacement of families, and in particular children, we know it is the most contributing factor for homelessness. And just on the pet-friendly refuges, while the minister did outline and confirm that this government has invested $100,000, it does not compare to the $500,000 that we see New South Wales contribute, nor does it compare to the $1.3 million that we see Victoria. We fall behind across our state counterparts when it comes to investing in women, children and the prevention of domestic and family violence. I certainly hope through the National Partnership Agreement the state government can contribute greater to what is a significant need across our community.
Deputy Speaker.
I call the